Products helps capture premium market prices and document forest crops in case of theft or other losses if you ever have anybody poaching your ginseng. Participants will learn about the history of the program, learn about how it's changed over the last 5 years, and they'll learn about the eligibility requirements, how to apply and how to stay enrolled. So if any of you maple producers out there are thinking about doing understory crops, especially botanicals, medicinals, this is the type of content that you're looking for. Our speaker tonight is Tanner Filiaw. He is the Plant Propagation Manager at United Plant Savers. For more than 15 years, Tanner has been working to promote non-timber forest products as a sustainable and ecologically based forest management strategy for woodland owners in Southeast Ohio and the Central Appalachian region. Tanner graduated from Ohio University in 2005 with a bachelor's degree in environmental geography and a minor specializing in environmental and plant biology. From 2005 to 2008, he served as an AmeriCorps Vista with Rural Action's Sustainable Forestry Program before accepting a staff position as the organization's non-timber forest products specialist. In this role, he regularly conducted workshops, gave presentations, and provided on-the-ground technical assistance for woodland owners interested in developing sustainable non-timber forest product enterprises and restoring at-risk forest herb communities. In 2015, after gaining 10 years of experience in the field, Tanner returned to Ohio University and earned a master's degree in environmental studies for his research examining mycorrhizal symbioses in wild simulated ginseng roots and the effect of mycorrhizal colonization on root ginsenoside concentrations. After completing his research, he returned to Rural Action in 2017 and continued to serve as the organization's NTFP specialist and ultimately their Sustainable Forestry Program Director before accepting his current position with United Plant Savers in 2021. In his spare time, Tanner enjoys spending time with his wife and daughter and experiments with producing forest-grown mushrooms, maple syrup, American ginseng, and a variety of other edible and medicinal forest products. So I know that there will be a ton of questions that come up during this presentation. If it's something that's urgent and helps to clarify, please feel free to throw that in the chat function. The chat is the one that looks like a word bubble down at the bottom of your screen. If it's a question that's sort of more in depth and you would like Tanner to be able to explain it with a little bit more care and attention, we'll try to save that for the end of the question and answer session. And please put those types of questions in the Q&A box that has 2 word bubbles above it. Now, I know that could be confusing for some of you all, and I promise I will be monitoring both of them and trying to do my best to get your questions onto the floor when they are appropriate. But with that, without any further ado, I'd like to just let Tanner take the floor and begin his presentation.
Thank you, Joey. Go ahead and share the screen here. So just to kick things off, Joey mentioned that the Forest Grown program has traditionally been for forest botanicals, but we are interested in the potential to expand that suite of products to also include other forest products like maple syrup, forest grown mushrooms. So, you know, if this is of interest, you know, I don't exactly know how this plays for maple syrup producers because they face some different challenges than some of our forest botanical producers, or just different altogether. So hopefully there is a way that the Forest Grown program could add value to maple products and increase marketability or price points for producers in the region. So, so kind of still look at this through the lens of maple syrup production, even though this has traditionally been for kind of more root crops like ginseng and so on and so forth. So just a real brief background on United Plant Savers. We're a nonprofit organization, membership based, so we really rely on membership dues to help fund our work. Our mission is to promote the conservation of at-risk medicinal plants that are found across North America, as well as their habitats. So forest conservation also plays in pretty keenly to medicinal plant conservation as well. I'm broadcasting to you today from our 370-acre botanical sanctuary located in Rutland, Ohio. This property was United Plant Savers, and the property was basically founded in 1998. So we've had a fairly short history, but we've experienced a ton of growth in the last couple years. In 2017, we were able to build our current office building that I'm in right now at the Center for Medicinal Plant Conservation through a series of donations and giving from our membership and other stakeholders. So we're grateful, very grateful for that. One of our major publications is the Journal of Medicinal Plant Conservation. So this is a pretty lengthy publication that comes out annually, has a lot of different articles about different things that United Plant Savers is working on, as well as some of our kind of satellite partners that we work with throughout the US and also internationally. This is a free publication with memberships, as well as other membership perks. But you can get all the back issues online on our website. So pretty good reading, a lot of interesting stuff. I'd encourage you to check it out. Check out our website. It's just unitedplantsavers.org, and you can learn a little bit more about the organization and the work that we do. But I don't want to take up your time too much with that and focus on what we're here to talk about today, which is the Forest Grown Verification Program, Forest Grown Verified. So sometimes you'll hear this just simply referred to as FGV. Sometimes you'll hear people refer to it as the Forest Grown Program, all one and the same. So as Joey kind of mentioned in our introduction here, this is a voluntary third-party verification program. So, there's no mandates or requirements or anything like that. This is entirely up to the producer if this is something that they want to do. This program was originally created in 2014. It was specifically created for producers of American ginseng, woodland producers. Mainly, the main reason for this is because ginseng is heavily regulated. It has, federal regulations, state regulations. It's important to distinguish the wild from, woods grown, or what we call wild simulated or forest farm ginseng. So this program was created by Pennsylvania Certified Organic, which is an organic certification agency based in Pennsylvania, to basically do that. And it's the only program of its kind. It's been a fairly slow start, and it's had a slow start, but quick growth as well. So it's kind of been a interesting beast to try and wrangle here. So within a couple years, this program was expanded to other species of botanicals outside of ginseng, primarily golden seal and black cohosh. And in 2019, this program came up for sale. PCO was somewhat in turmoil, and United Plant Savers was always involved kind of as a stakeholder in the development of this program and a partner and a consultant. So we didn't want to see this program disappear so quickly, and we were able to purchase that program in 2019. And since then, we've been able to expand the verification protocols to 9 forest species, most of which are kind of listed here. You've probably seen some of these or heard of them if you spend a lot of time in the woods or have done any harvesting in the past. But ramps, Solomon seal, bloodroot, ginseng, golden seal, these are the big ones, blue cohosh. So currently there are 9 core species, but that does not limit what can be verified. So we have people who are growing woodland botanicals that are outside of these 9 core species, and they've been able to demonstrate, through the forest grown system plan that you fill out when you apply for the program, that they are, indeed cultivating these plants. They document their, propagation techniques and management techniques. And once that is, pretty well documented, we're able to go ahead and bring some additional products under the verification umbrella. So that's kind of where we're sitting at with maple syrup and mushrooms, trying to think outside of these kind of root crops. And, like I said before, there's different challenges that these different kind of bins of producers face. I don't know if there's a lot of adulteration in maple syrup. There's a lot of adulteration in the botanical markets with different materials getting mixed in. I don't know if you have anything like that in maple syrup world, where there's, secondary sugars or sweeteners that are used in the product, to kind of thin it down or extend it. But basically, I think the FGV program, as far as maple producers could go, would really help basically show that this is a craft product made by, a farmer who's managing their woodlot and is, intentionally producing this product in a meaningful way. They're managing their forest in a sustainable way. They're managing that sugar bush for long-term yields, long-term health. And, that is all very inherent and core to the forest grown program. So I'm interested in hearing from maple syrup producers on how, elements of this program could really work for you all. And, we're going to have to make a few adaptations to make sure that the forest grown system plan and the application is also relevant to maple producers. So your feedback in those regards is going to be invaluable, priceless. So just kind of getting back into some of the basics of the program here. These are the core goals of the program. By and large, it was created to help document crops, in case of regulatory changes to those species like ginseng that are regulated, the crops that were stolen or lost for some reason to disease or whatever natural disaster, could be anything along those lines. So that was kind of the initial impetus to developing this program, but pretty quickly it was clear that there was more potential to utilize this as a kind of market incentive or branding initiative to kind of help promote these craft small scale producers who are really taking the time to produce these good quality products, as opposed to wild harvested products, which are generally the main sources of competition and price competition for producers is the wild harvested products. So this was a way to try and help those producers capture premium prices, and also for herbal products companies to help distinguish these products in their product line. So you can see on this slide here, Mountain Rose Herbs was one of the first companies to really dig into this pretty hard and really support the program, and developed a whole forest grown verified line of ginseng and black cohosh products. So we've seen some good support from the industry, and that helps build consumer awareness about the brand and some of the sustainability issues that are kind of inherent to forest production. Whether you're talking about botanicals or maple syrup or whatever, there's always sustainability issues somewhere in that value chain. So basically, private landowners of any size, producers of any scale or level of establishment are welcome to apply. Basically, everybody's welcome. There are no size limitations. You don't have to have like a minimum of 10 acres or anything like that. So it's pretty well open to just about anybody. It is for privately owned land. If you don't own the land, there's a lease agreement situation where basically the landowner will just sign off on the affidavit saying that you have permission to utilize their land to, cultivate these products. So maybe some maple syrup producers are in that situation where they have co-op land, or maybe they're not the owner of the property, but maybe it's, family land or something like that. So there's workarounds for that. Just basically you have to have the landowner's signature and acknowledgement that everybody's on board and on the same page. For those people who are producing roots, this doesn't necessarily apply to maple syrup producers per se, but prior plantings can be verified. So as long as you have receipts for your inputs, say planting stock, or other forms of documentation, those can be grandfathered in. So there's no, essentially there's no length of time that you have to be in the program before you're, before you could start marketing products under the FGV label. So sometimes some people are familiar with the organic program, where if you're transitioning from a piece of land that's not managed organically to organic, you have a 3-year transition. There's really nothing like that with FGV. If you have older operation, basically it can be grandfathered in as long as there's good documentation showing that. So that doesn't necessarily probably apply to maple producers, because it's not really a planting. You're managing a sugar bush, managing that natural forest. So right now this program is pretty small. I forgot to update this, but there are currently 18 participants in the FGV program. They are all root producers. We have a few more coming online. Hopefully this will be closer to 25 by the middle of next year, or the beginning of the next growing season. So right now we have 15 growers and harvesters, 2 entities that are verified as processors and handlers, and they are in 9 different states. So that's important to also note. We have these 2 designations. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a second, but we have verification for growers and harvesters and verifications for processors and handlers. So say for somebody who wanted to just, if they wanted to buy your FGV maple syrup and package it, they could also come in and have their packaging or processing site verified. So it's more of a chain of custody certification for processors and handlers, just to make sure there's not commingling of FGV products with non-FGV products. So pretty straightforward, just kind of materials handling type of stuff there. Mostly the people in this program are very small scale. Some of them are even pre-market. They're not necessarily selling products yet, but they are enrolled in the program as a way to document what they're doing. So that documentation part does seem to be an important aspect to a lot of producers. But overall, this is a slow growing program. It's still in its infancy. We're very small as far as number of participants, and we're really trying to grow it slowly and intentionally. We're kind of getting to this point now where we're talking about different products, what's that look like? And that's why we're having this conversation today. So we're looking to grow and diversify. The application process is really pretty straightforward. So all of the application materials can be found on, if you just go to unitedplantsavers.org/FGV, that'll bring up our Forest Grown website, or you can navigate straight through our main page through the drop-down menus. All these documents are available to download if you'd like to view the whole application, give it a read through, or if you'd like to fill one out and submit one. They're all there for your use and access on our website. But basically, this would probably need to be adapted for a maple producer, because this is very heavy on, you know, as you can see in the slide here, you know, about site establishment, you know, where was the seed from, or where were the roots from? Were they from cultivated stock or parental stock? So, you know, obviously that doesn't make a ton of sense for the maple syrup producer. So as I said before, you know, ways that we can get a little feedback maybe from these, from you all in this stakeholder group could really be an important way that we can shape this up and make it more relevant to a broader breadth of forest producers. But basically, we're just, you know, kind of listing the plantings, the inputs, the production practices, you know, what's your record keeping system. So all these things are going to be probably things that maple syrup producers are already doing. You know, list of plantings could be, you know, sugar bush sites. You know, maybe they're not contiguous sites. Maybe you have different tapping areas. So, you know, as you read through this, if you choose to do so, think about it through the lens of a maple producer and what makes the most sense to you. Typically, there's a planting map. It's kind of just a general aerial photo or a sketch of just kind of the property and where the plantings or the sugar bush or the sugar shack or wherever, you know, that infrastructure that's going to be verified is at. So, you know, all this is private information. It's not shared with anybody or anything like that. If there's any concerns. The application fee, these application fees are a little outdated. So we actually have waived all application fees. This program is being subsidized by a private donor, a United Plant Savers donor. They want this program to be accessible for everybody. So pretty much this has been in place for the last 3 years, the no application fees, and it should remain that way for the foreseeable future. If application fees ever did come back, this is probably what it would be. It'd be a $200 initial application fee, an inspection fee. So $200 covers your application and inspections. And then we have annual renewal paperwork. Basically, it's a $50 fee. But as I said, this is all basically been waived for the time being and should be for the foreseeable future. Here's just a little example of kind of the planting sites table and some of the demographic information. You know, this could be adapted to a sugar bush. You know, it could be sugar bush 1 instead of estimated site population or number of plants. It could be an acreage or a number of tapped trees. You know, all that kind of good stuff. So this is what it would look like for a root producer. It would be a little bit different for a maple producer. It's not wanting to advance my slides. There we go. And again, this would be an example of a planting map. Now this is pretty elaborate compared to probably what a maple producer map would be, but you know, something like this with, you know, a box or 2, you know, or 3 representing maybe your sugar bush or your tapping areas. So pretty basic, you know, it doesn't have to be to scale. It's not, you know, it's kind of a do your best. You know, most maps are not even this elaborate. We get a lot of hand-drawn maps. It's really just a way to help the inspector when they're on the ground doing that verification. initially to kind of help navigate to the sites. And also it's good for everybody to keep good records, because you'll forget in time. So I did mention this previously. We have these different designations for growers. So within, as I previously mentioned, we have grower harvester designation and the processor handler. So within the grower and harvester designation, we have these two bins that producers can fall into. And most likely maple producers would be what we consider forest farmed. It's more of a, even though the trees are there naturally, they're wild trees. I don't know, just the nature of trees versus perennial roots. We would probably consider that forest farming as opposed to wild stewarding. So the wild stewarded designation is really put in place for people that have large populations of these, root crops on their property that they can sustainably manage and kind of hit the ground running and be market ready a little bit sooner. Both of these are pretty popular designations for root growers. But like I said, I think forest farm kind of fits the bill mostly for maple syrup producers. There's no difference in the application. It's really just the management. When you look at the application, wild stewarded has a little bit higher of a burden because you're managing a wild population and you want that to be there for the long term. So, that does ring true for sugar bush management as well. We want that forest cover to be there for as long as possible. We want that forest to be healthy so you can keep producing. Processors, handlers, retailers, so this is probably not relevant to a lot of folks listening to this presentation today, but this is we're mainly concerned about how the materials are handled. We don't want commingling is the technical term that you'll kind of find in this processor handler world, but we're interested in how things are stored, labeled, packaged, separated. So people who come under a processor handler designation, they're really kind of providing us with a flow diagram of how they handle the materials, a facility map, showing how different products are segregated to prevent that commingling, so on and so forth. So that might not be entirely relevant to a lot of folks in the audience today, but this is another relevant part of the program. So after you apply, pretty straightforward. If you're familiar with organic certification, it basically works the same way. You apply, somebody's going to come out to your property and they're going to do that inspection, based on your application material. We're going to go through, check out some plantings, look at some of those estimated population sizes that you provided in your table or production area sizes, and just make sure that everything looks copacetic and matches up. Generally, for the root producers, now this wouldn't really apply to maple producers either, but there's a post-harvest inspection. So when people harvest a crop, a root crop, we need to get back in there the next year to kind of make sure that everything looks good and the harvest numbers look good and the site still looks, viable and, things were done sustainably. So there is that post-harvest inspection. Obviously, that really wouldn't be required for maple producers. If you all have any thoughts on any post-harvest or post-production season things that would be relevant to look out for maple producers, like making sure that the taps get pulled, and not just sitting in the trees. So the trees have time to heal the tap hole, stuff like that. So if you have any thoughts, please feel free to reach out and share those with us on how this might be more applicable and more relevant for maple producers. The inspections are done by UPS staff or satellite partners. We have a lot of partners around the region that work in this agroforestry, forest farming space that are highly knowledgeable and professional people. So sometimes we have those folks in your individual state would come out and do an inspection that saves money for inspection costs, travel time. Ultimately, that's to help keep costs down for the producers. We want this to be as profitable and easy as possible. Allowable inputs. So inputs, amendments, treatments just must be used according to the label. This would apply to maple producers. I know there are, defoaming agents and, different things that folks could use. So as long as it's being used for its intended use, that's the main thing. So the products have to be for agricultural or food grade use. And for our root growers or, folks who are growing anything that you could use from the site, natural materials, strongly encouraged. That's all well and good. If you're using other stuff, we have a place on the application. You just list that. And like I said, all we really care about is that it's being used according to the label for its intended purpose. No weird stuff, which, none of you would do anyway, but we have seen it. So it pays to mention it. After the inspection is done and everything looks good, you get the old certificate of verification. These are good for 1 year. They generally run February to February is kind of our new cycle. That date was set basically for root producers. So their paperwork, their renewal paperwork, and the certificate renewal would be happening in the off season. I recognize that February is getting pretty close or is already into maple producer season, depending on where you're at geographically. So obviously we would work with the producers to come up with a relevant date for, getting those update paperwork and making sure you have your certificate when you're producing your product and going to market. And that's the most important thing, is that if you have a buyer that's interested in paying you a premium price, we want you to have your certificate and also be able to have free use of the Forest Grown logo when you go to market. So making sure that certificates are updated in a timely fashion for the producers is a big part of my job, because it's not good if you don't have your certificate and you're going to sell the product and your buyer wants to see it. So maintaining compliance in the program is generally pretty easy. We've already kind of covered some of this. The annual update paperwork is really all, that's the main thing. And if that fee was there, paying that $50 annual renewal fee. Here's something to note. If you get on the website and you look at our website and you're looking at the Forest Grown program manual, you will see that there was originally a sales assessment fee that was created by PCO, or basically you have a 0.05%, basically a levy on sales over $5,000. United Plant Savers has done away with all sales assessment fees. This was a slightly outdated presentation. I'm sorry I didn't update that, but we want this to basically be, an accessible program. If there ever was, like I said, the application cost, we just want it to be one flat fee and done. We don't want, we don't like the idea of, people having to pay royalties, on top of the products they're producing. That's not why we're into this. So we have done away with that recently in the last couple months. We've never charged anybody a sales assessment fee. We've had a few people provide one as a donation to United Plant Savers without, requesting it. But otherwise, that's going to be a thing of the past on this program. So just just to be aware. Another important part of maintaining compliance is just reporting your new plantings, making sure that paperwork, the update paperwork is really accurate, and also reporting all your harvest and your sales accurately. Like I said, we're not going to assess any sales. We don't have a sales assessment, but it is nice for us to be able to know what producers are selling, volume wise, price wise. Sorry, it's getting a little dim here. So, that was, again, if you're willing to share that type of information, we like to see, how this program is working for people, and if they're able to, make sales and increase sales. So it's always very valuable information to have. And the most important thing in maintaining compliance is, not to violate the program policies and standards. So pretty straightforward. A big part of this is marketing. So the use of the FGV logo is one of the main, the main benefits for producers. They get to put that logo on there. United Plant Savers, forest grown, verified. Maybe in your market that doesn't do a whole lot for you. Maybe it does. But that's where it really comes down to, is this is a branding, this is a logo. So getting the forest grown logo on your product hopefully will help distinguish you from your competitors, or help you tell your story about you and your product and your farm. And that's a really big part of being a small scale producer and capturing premium prices. It's telling your story. Just important to note, we do not broker sales or fill purchase orders or anything like that. If you have product that you want to sell, best we could do, you can get in touch with us. We can help put you in contact with some people that might be interested, and then you all can do the business. But we don't broker the sales or do the purchase orders. There are entities out there, partners of ours, that do that. If you're interested in, connecting with any of them, feel free to connect with me offline or at another time. We already talked about that. I'm just going to skip right over. And that's basically the full overview of the Forest Grown program. It's, pretty straightforward. Here's my contact info. Most easily reached by email, because I don't generally hold regular office hours. I'm outside a lot. But you can also try and catch me on our office line there at the 742-3455. And again, here are the websites for both United Plant Savers and the Forest Grown program. Strongly would encourage you to get on there, check us out, learn more about UPS, what we're doing, other ways you can get involved, and also the FGV program. And all the materials are there. You can look at the program manual, the application, and see what you think. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me at your convenience, and I will do my best to get back in touch with you ASAP. So we'll just go ahead and.
Great. Thank you so much, Tanner.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the chat box and at the Q&A, and they're both empty at the moment. I do want to give people just a second to weigh in and throw their own questions. And if after that second there aren't any, I've got some of my own, of course.
No problem.
Okay, let me give them just a second. All right, I know it takes a little while to type questions, so please do keep throwing them in. Oh, here's one. All right, this is from Roy. So Roy Ramey is asking, what does your organization do to advertise and educate consumers about the label and what it means, or must we as producers educate them?
It's a good question. So UPS does a lot of networking around the forest grown program. So our executive director, Susan Leopold, is very closely connected with a lot of herbal products companies to stakeholders within that industry. She goes to trade shows, conferences all over the place all the time, constantly, pushing the FGV, trying to drum up more interest with companies about sourcing FGV products. So that's a big way, is really just networking with, and that's not consumers. So it doesn't really answer his question directly. But those are more buyers who would be producing a product. And then as far as consumers go, we're working on doing more with trying to showcase producers in the FGV program, especially those that are producing products. So we have products here at our building for sale that carry the FGV logo. Presentations like this, we're generally just trying to get the word out. It's slow, but within the herbalism world, kind of that we function in, we've actually done quite a bit of promotion and education around FGV, what it means, why it's good. The downside to that might be, you're speaking to the choir. These people already know that there are sustainability issues with the herb trade and sourcing, so on and so forth. But we try to pound the pavement as much as possible. But again, as a grower, as the farmer, there's always going to be an element of that burden's going to fall to you, to tell your story about your product, why it's good, why it's different. So, we'll continue to try and grow our educational platform as much as possible. But there's always going to be a little bit of education, that falls back on the producer themselves,
Yeah, and on the consumer too, right?
Yeah, I mean the consumer.
Buyer beware, right?
I mean the consumer's looking. Yeah, I mean consumer education is very difficult because they're looking for, what's the cheapest price. A lot of times, what's the cheapest price thing that I can get? So they're going to buy the $6 maple syrup instead of the $12 bottle. And you find that with botanicals and all these types of things. So I guess one thing I didn't really mention, is the intersection between, maple production and a lot of these understory crops. Sugar maple specifically tends to be a pretty good companion species and overstory species for a lot of these forest botanicals. So, the way that sugar bush is laid out and managed, does create a lot of opportunity for co-production of maybe some of these longer term perennials in the understory. All that stuff's going to be dormant while you're making syrup, so just a way to kind of layer, income opportunities in that sugar bush. I think there's a lot of potential there. We're always looking for good growers, good farmers, people who are in the woods producing stuff, who care about doing that. And maple producers are, they're in the woods, they're producing stuff. They've got forest canopy, they have experience producing a forest product. So these are the type of folks that I think have a lot of potential to be, pretty successful managers of some of these other crops if they have the interest in doing so. Now, granted, that's all, caveats to all that, but I didn't mention that in the presentation, but I definitely want to be sure to mention it that, these things do work together and they're not, in their separate bins necessarily all the time.
To follow up on that, I'd like to sort of ask, can you give sort of just a really brief picture for our maple producers of what it takes to grow these root crops. What time of year do you plant them? How many years do they stay in the ground? What time of year do you harvest? What are the pests and those sorts of things?
Okay. So most of these species, I'll just stick with a couple as examples. Ginseng and golden seal and ramps. So ginseng and golden seal are either seed or root planted in the fall of the year. Ginseng, golden seal, and ramps, they're all the seed is planted in the fall of the year. Golden seal rhizomes are transplanted in the fall of the year. So right now we're hitting planting season right now. So, definitely outside of maple season. Now ramps have a little bit of a spring. They have a spring harvesting season. Typically maple season's already wrapped up by then, so you don't really have a lot of overlap there. But when you're using wild simulated methods, this kind of gets into a whole other forest farming presentation. But if you're using the most low input methods, your harvest cycles are probably going to be anywhere, from 5 to 7 years for, say, golden seal, which is a little bit of a faster growing rhizome. But it could be anywhere on the order of 10 to 15 years for ginseng, which is more slow growing, a lot of variability in the site, growing sites. Plants are going to perform differently on different sites. So just as a caveat, those are kind of some ballpark timelines, so fairly long term. Now, if you get into some different production methods that are a little bit more intensive, where you can actually, do some manipulation of the soil, maybe some light tilling, kind of push some roots a little bit, you could turn them over in 4 years. So generally anywhere from, just as an average, 5 to 7 years, you could probably say for most, under average conditions. So it's a time commitment, certainly. But if you have a profitable maple enterprise that this is all built under, you have income generation while your plants are maturing, and ultimately, it's not a one and done type of harvest. You're going to be planting those 5 to 7 years before you hit your first harvest. So then you're going to have successive harvests for years after, or in perpetuity if you manage them that way.
And if you have enough land, right? We have another question from Roy Ramey. So he's asking, what's your revenue model? And he's asking, I think, about UPS. What's your revenue model? How do you earn enough to stay in business? And he says, I want to make sure you'll be around in the long haul to continue supporting us.
So yeah, United Plant Savers, if that's what he is indeed asking about. We're membership based. We have a huge membership, over 5,000 due paying members. So that's a significant influx of unencumbered funds for us. That really helps. We are involved in a variety of private grants, federal grants that help support staff time. We get donations, private donations. We have earned income. We do root and seed sales. We have online store for just general merchandise. It actually does really well. I don't manage any of that, but I'm shocked at how supportive United Plant Savers members are. It's just such a really great group of people that are very supportive of the organization. And then on top of that, we, I didn't mention this before, but we recently purchased a large herbal conference called the International Herb Symposium that's been going on for about 25, 30 years. It is a big deal, and that is something that does generate a good amount of revenue. So that is also a new potential stream of earned income to support United Plant Savers. And overall, United Plant Savers is in a really good position right now. Plus, we have members who care about the Forest Grown program, the mission of that program, and thus are putting their dollars in play to help support that program. So overall, we're doing pretty good at this point in time. And we've had a tremendous amount of growth in the last few years. So we're adding more staff, so
that's great. It's always good to hear good news like that. Roy did clarify he's asking specifically about funding for the Forest Grown Verified program. I assume that because you all hold that, you hold that verification program, that you can fund it from your general revenue. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a very, like I said, it's a very small program. Even if it doubled in size, the financial burden would be very, very small. Basically the only costs really associated with the program right now are my staff time to administrate it, and then when we go out and do inspections. So overall, it's pretty low overhead at this point in time. So yeah, the program is on much more secure footing now than it was in 2016 before we bought it. I've been involved with the program since it started. I was one of the first enrollees. So I've been enrolled in FGV, since it started. So I've kind of witnessed firsthand, some of the growing pains, some of the admin issues, so I think it's on a pretty good footing right now, compared to maybe where we've been at times in the past. So cool. As I said, we're trying to grow slowly, strategically, not put the cart before the horse and start stumbling over ourselves here.
Okay, great. We had an anonymous attendee ask if I could repost your contact info, and I did post it in the chat. So anyone who wants to can look in the chat and get in touch with you. And of course, you all presumably know how to get in touch with us at Future Generations University. Easiest way to get in touch with me personally is joey.alloy@future.edu. And we will always get you in touch with any of our panel participants. I do want to sort of follow up on some of on Roy's first question, and just ask if you can give us some good anecdotes or good stories about people who have sought the verification, used it on their marketing material, and then had success in their sales or something like that.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we've got a couple. As I said, we try not to share people's info, too much. If they want to be out in the limelight, that's fine. So I'll talk about a couple people who are out there. They've done public advertising. So there's the one gentleman who has been supplying Mountain Rose herbs. His name's Randy. You can find some Mountain Rose kind of promotional FGV video material with him online. But he's, was growing ginseng for a long time, kind of just digging a little bit here and there, selling it as wild, whatnot. And, then he got tapped in with Forest Grown, like right from the beginning. And, he's making good sales. He's got a good supplemental thing going on. So he's gotten a lot of, publicity and promotion through, working with Mountain Rose and being a, consistent and, high quality producer. So, Randy Yenzi Ginseng has been a real good one. Harding's Ginseng Farm, they're pretty popular, or well known, been around for a long time. They're based in Maryland. they've sold some FGV product in the past. Small companies, it's really more about the smaller. I think that's where the most of the value is for that smaller entity. So we got one other smaller herbal products company that comes to mind, Equinox Botanicals. They've got a couple different FGV products coming online. We had the label of one of them there on one of the slides. It was like a salve stick, and they do an Inferno cider with ramps that are FGV ramps. And also they're doing a FGV ginseng simple tincture. So pure ginseng. I will go ahead and I'll just, I'll throw it out there. I harvested some of my ginseng and sold it to them to go in that product. So, it's, I think that's where the value is for small root producers, is to be able to find those smaller manufacturers who want a high quality ingredient and, meet somewhere in the middle on price, where it's going to be more money for me, less money for them compared to like where they would source it for, as far as like retail prices. If you were going to buy, high quality retail ginseng, you're going to pay out the wazoo for it. So, finding those nice middle grounds where it works for everybody, and we've got a couple other people that are coming online. Like I said, we got a few people that are starting to harvest. We got one guy, he's pulling out 25 pounds of, golden seal first harvest this year. And, so it's starting to trickle on. A lot of this is all forest farmed. We do have some people doing a little bit of wild stewarded. There have been some sales in the past kind of associated with folks around like the Appalachian Beginning Forest Farmer Coalition and the Virginia Tech Project. A few years ago, they did some black cohosh harvesting, and you could find there's a lot of publicity around that one. They marketed that pretty hard because it was one of the first kind of FGV sales of black cohosh, and the price point was quite considerably higher from the wild product. So those are just some anecdotal ones off the top of my head. Like I said, I don't like to get too specific with people's information, but
cool.
It's coming along. A few people this year's probably been, like I said, the most growth, new people coming on, new people coming into people coming into market ready status, who have been in the program for a couple years. So.
Yeah, you mentioned it can be 15 years for ginseng harvest, and the program's 8 years old, right? So yeah. Anecdotes are great in those sorts of situations. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for presenting tonight, Tanner. I want to announce that next month's webinar will be about invasive pests, and we'll be having experts from multiple states, sort of telling you what sorts of things you should be looking out for that might damage your maples, or just be damaging to your crops in general, that you could find in the forest when you're out there watching your sugar bush. There are citizen science initiatives that you can engage in if you see the bugs and you want to help get rid of them. So this is a good way to get plugged in on that and learn how to keep those critters away. Thank you all so much for coming to join us, and thank you again to Tanner for presenting, and we will absolutely be seeing more of you.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.
Real quick before everybody skedaddles, we have a little bit of an exit poll I just launched. Please feel free to give us a little bit of feedback. Thank you. Thank you, folks. See you next time.
Thanks.